What's happening, internet? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Adrian, aka Foamm Cosplay. If you're new to my channel, I make a lot of cosplay tutorials, fan films, movie and TV reviews, fitness and fandom, and everything else in between. So if you like my content, please make sure to leave a like, comment, definitely subscribe to my channel. Today, we're going to go over my review of the Peacemaker series. What I liked, what I didn't like, what I felt could have been done better, what I felt happened behind the scenes that may have influenced certain things on screen, and my overall rating. Let's start with the most important character, Christopher Smith, aka Peacemaker. We see that Peacemaker, based on his first appearance in Suicide Squad, is a guy who is a professional, stone-cold, competent killer, and also someone who's extremely socially awkward. He's a guy who tries very hard to make it look like he doesn't care what other people think, which we find out to just be a sort of coping mechanism for him, because he's actually a guy who feels very deeply, and he's someone who throughout the show learns to trust other people, learns to open himself up, and he learns that as much as you want to be alone, you have to let other people in or you're never going to grow as a person. The other characters on the team, Leora Adebayo, good old Amanda Waller's daughter. It's through her character, who is in essence the opposite of Peacemaker, that we find the sort of yin and yang, if you will. She learned we have to get our hands dirty, and that means we can't back away when things get inconvenient, when things get rough. Someone has to do it, and it might as well be you. And in return, Peacemaker learns that if you treat someone with respect, if you treat them with kindness, if you try to walk a mile in their shoes, that you learn to make friends, to take care of other people. And in essence, that's what a superhero is. Someone who has extraordinary powers, who looks out for other people. We also have Emilia Harcourt returning from the Suicide Squad. I liked her. I liked her character because she also contrasts with Adebayo, and then she later on contrasts with Peacemaker because she is a stone cold killer. She is the kind of person I'd want on my tactical team. There's only one downside to her. She is a product of her training. As Rambo used to say, you just can't turn it off. She has no friends outside of work. Most of her interactions are colored by basically she is the older sister of the team. Her job is to herd the others, to keep them focused on the mission. Her character progression is that she learns to trust. We move to John Economos, nerd geek, guy in the chair, computer hacker, whizman. We see that outside of his competency, he's just as socially awkward and as stuck in his job as the rest of them. A guy who's missed out on life because he threw himself into his work, was able to build relationships with other people, to build friendships with other people. After having gone on this adventure, and he realizes, you know what? I am worthy of love. And Clemson Mern, his arc is basically rebelling against the interests and the survival of his own species because he believed that humanity deserved to be able to make their own choices. The main crux of the villain's argument is that humans are incapable of making the wise decisions, therefore it has to be made for them. But we see that Mern chose against his people. He chose against his better judgment and sided with the humans. And that's something that Peacemaker does as well in episode 8. Lastly, on the good guy team, we have Vigilante. He doesn't have a life outside of superheroing. He doesn't have he has a day job, but it's dead end. He's just doing it to fund his vigilanteing. This is basically Peacemaker's final form if Peacemaker just kept going the way that he is. He can't feel emotions like the rest of us. He doesn't respond to social cues like the rest of us. He doesn't understand other people. He doesn't see the value of life as much. That was the breakdown of the characters. Now let's go to the overall plot. We see that after Peacemaker gets out of the hospital, he is recruited once again by this offshoot, the 11th Street Kids, to take down the Butterflies, an alien race are embedding themselves into the minds of politicians and influential figures in order to influence the Earth into making the right choices for themselves. We then see the aftermath of that in episode 2, where Peacemaker basically spends the entire episode trying to escape the building which Superman would have flown out of, which Batman would have grappling hooked away from. And this shows that Peacemaker, if he wasn't, John Cena shaped guy with helmets that can do literally anything, basically just a normal guy. The whole point of episode 2 was we're trying to fix our mistakes. So we're trying to get Peacemaker out from the place where he basically just nuked the entire parking lot. Next, episode 3, one of the highlights of the show. So aside from the scene in the first episode where we see Peacemaker cry about the things that he's done, in episode 3, we see that he finally starts struggling with the fact that he has to kill people. But we then see his dear friend Vigilante, who does not have the same struggle that he has, and he just goes bam, bam, bam. Moving on to episode 4. This is the episode where Peacemaker's dad ends up in prison, and Adebayo, in all of her righteousness, decides to convince Vigilante of Peacemaker's father. Episode 5. We see that the gang now know that the butterflies, rather than try to attack them head-on, it's better to just attack their food source. We see solid action scenes this episode. Their final confrontation is with Charlie the gorilla, who they all have to fight, and they all fail to fight until Economos comes along with the clutch. And he's basically just this dork who doesn't know how to fight. So every time he does something cool, it's big news. Unlike if Peacemaker does something cool, it's just like, okay, that's expected. This is where we see the team start to kind of come together, because they had a successful mission and everyone pulled their weight, and this was the start of where Peacemaker slowly realizes that I'm part of a team. That's basically Peacemaker's whole deal. He cannot trust anyone. He tries to push them away, because the last time someone trusted him, his brother, who he ended up accidentally, punching to death. Next, we get to episode 6, where Myrn tells the story of the butterflies, how they came to Earth, their entire plan for world domination. This episode, we see that the kind of side story with the Peacemaker's dad, the white dragon, and his interactions with the police, with Detective Song, kind of plays out. And we see that Peacemaker's dad, who of course is smart, he gets himself free from prison, and Detective Song, being the lawful good that she is, decides to go arrest Peacemaker, who was actually involved. Plenty of good action scenes, including the one with Eagly, with the assist. It's basically like that Riley mission in Call of Duty Ghosts. Also in this episode, we see just how powerful the butterflies can be en masse when they take over the entire police station as well as the detention center. Which leads us to episode 7, where Peacemaker realizes that he was betrayed by someone on the inside who was trying to frame him for all of the things which the team was responsible for, which the US government was responsible for. Then see the team kind of fracture, split up, everyone's on the run, everyone has their own problems now. Peacemaker, Economos, and Vigilante managed to fight off Peacemaker's dad as well as his cronies, who are, the clan. So we see how this really affects Peacemaker deep. As much as he hated his dad, he also loved his dad, because his dad's the only family he has left. Lastly, we go to episode 8. This might be my favorite episode of the series. There are moments I didn't like, but this episode was good. We see that the team, they finally confront the farm. And their plan, rather than go in guns blazing, is to plant Peacemaker's sonic boom helmet inside the barn so that they can collapse the barn and therefore collapse the cow inside underground. Of course, that plan doesn't work. This is Peacemaker. This isn't the A-team. And in their struggle, we managed to learn a few more things about our characters. We basically see that the characters learn to really care for each other. They become friends by the end of this journey, and they manage to do well together as a team. Harcourt, Vigilante, Peacemaker with his shield. By the way, I'm thinking of making that. That's a good shield. Fight the butterflies head on, and they're overwhelmed. But basically, the entire team covers Peacemaker because he's the important one. He has to take out the cow. It's a full circle moment for Christopher, because throughout the series, he learns that to strive for peace, true peace, is not to kill people who get in the way of the people who dictate what peace is. True peace comes from caring for other people. Goff basically shows a mirror into him. I know what you are, Peacemaker. You're like us. And if we don't do this, your world is going to end up exactly like ours did. And you're going to wipe yourselves out. Okay, the message was very heavy-handed. It's like, James Gunn, just calm down. We're trying to watch a TV show about superheroes here. We're not trying to fight people on Facebook comment section. That being said, it was good at illustrating how Peacemaker changed. Because before, he would have wholeheartedly agreed to save the cow, given her arguments. But throughout the show, he learns that peace comes from being with other people. You make peace with other people. The whole point of the show is that he made peace with others, and then he made peace with himself. This is what allows him to use Adebayo as a human torpedo, and he basically dooms their species on Earth. But that's mission accomplished, and Goff ends up tagging along with him, and she basically just spends her last days with him as a butterfly. And we see the team come together, where we see Superman in silhouette, Wonder Woman in silhouette, Aquaman, the actual Jason Momoa man, and Flash, Ezra Miller. Since they were filming The Flash and Aquaman 2, I'm pretty sure they were available to come on. But it was cool to see the Justice League, where they showed up in a way that's respectful to them, but also very much in character to the show. I appreciated most about this show was how neatly everything was tied up at the end of episode 8. And then we see Christopher making peace with other people who are different from him. He's making peace with himself, and he's making peace with his differences with other people. He's also showing that he can care for someone else, that he can care deeply for someone else in a way that's not romantic or sexual. And I appreciated the ending where we set up for season 2, where it's him with Goff, with Eagly, with the imagination version of his dad, and how he has that gnawing, worry feeling that his dad will never leave him. And with the plot out of the way, I'll go on to some things that I liked more specifically. So the soundtrack, awesome, perfect. I love the soundtrack of Peacemaker. I'm not the biggest rock person, but Do You Wanna Taste It has been on repeat in my house for the past month that Peacemaker's been playing. That scene where Peacemaker plays the piano and that's really John Cena playing the piano, that was excellent. And that's something that James Gunn knows how to do well. He knows how to write broken characters in a way where you sympathize with them. You understand why they are the way that they are. He writes people who are kind of messed up. He excels at making us care for goofy and absolutely what the heck kind of characters. Kind of characters who, if you met them as people in real life, you wouldn't want to spend more than a conversation talking. And he makes you care for them. He makes you relate to them. He makes you want to see them grow as people. And he did very well with that, with Peacemaker. As my title suggests, I really enjoyed John Cena's depiction of Peacemaker. He took this character, he owned the character, and we've seen the range of John Cena. Now we see him as someone who's able to put his entire face and put his entire psyche into the character. We see his range with Peacemaker, and we see Christopher Smith grow as a character because of John Cena's depiction. So I felt that was a major positive of the show. John Cena really carried this show on his massive wide shoulders, and he really flexed his acting biceps in this show. In terms of the costume design, I also enjoyed it. There are only 4 costume characters in this show. Excluding the cameos by the Justice League. So, Peacemaker, of course. Vigilante. I enjoyed this costume. I really wanted to make my own version. I just didn't have enough time. We see Judo Master's costume was absurd. Changed a lot from the comics. Comics was just red and yellow with the rising sun on it. This one, it's a green with a dragon. And it fit. He fit within the show, as absurd as he is. A guy whose power is that he's good at Japanese martial arts. And that made him a more memorable character, because it's like, okay, describe Judo Master. He's green and he's small. Is he a leprechaun? Which they mentioned in the show. We also see White Dragon, who is very menacing, very terrifying in his costume. Enjoyed the way that the costume was done. Okay, James Gunn is both the reason that this show is so great and also the reason why the show has reason why I have problems with the show in particular. When it comes to writing fictional characters, James Gunn excels at writing them and their emotional moments. When it comes to their character interactions, it's like the comedy's hit or miss, because the average person wouldn't talk like that. Because if they talk like that with an F word every other sentence, you would get nothing done in the civilized society. References to the DCEU. Thank you, James Gunn. You gave us the Justice League in this show. You gave us Batmite. Mentions to Kite Man. Other very obscure villains and heroes of the DCEU. You made it work. As for references to real life, he's very on the nose. Like, you could tell what kind of person James Gunn is based on how these characters talk, what they say. They tend to strawman each other a lot. They tend to say, oh, you're this and that. You're white, something, insert adjective here. If you keep looking at people based on what they represent, you're not gonna build relationships with people, because you don't see them as individuals. You see them as traits. In terms of the plot of the show, the plot was simple, but it was straightforward. It was everything they needed to get these characters to a place where they grow emotionally. And therefore, I find that the story was a good story. It was a good story to tell. With the good and the bad, being mixed in with the show. I will now say if I think the show is good or bad overall. It had, at times, absurd dialogue. It had more on-the-nose references than I would like in my superhero show. Overall, I give this series a C+ to a B, which is high for the shows that I've been watching these past 2 years. The show was a surprisingly emotional and introspective look at absolutely absurd people and absolutely absurd characters, and it humanized them. It allowed you to empathize with people who you would otherwise not want to be near around. Fun action sequences that were visually exciting. Good comedy that hit most of the time. It had a strong soundtrack, and it had excellent performances, especially by John Cena, who really came into the role. That was my review of the Peacemaker series. Like my content and want to see more of it, please make sure to leave a like, comment, definitely subscribe to my channel. Until next time, props to you and costumes too. Peace, Maker.